Welcome to our Utah Valley University Digital Transformation Seminar today. My name is Kelly Flanagan. I am the Digital Transformation Vice President and CIO here at UVU. A special welcome to our students, UVU faculty and staff, President Tuminas, members of our International Advisory Board, members of our Board of Trustees, and other special guests. I am excited to welcome, introduce, and learn from Dr. David Kellermann today. After my introduction, we will hear from Dr. Kellermann and leave 10 minutes or so for answers to questions that the audience is invited to ask via chat. Dr. Kellermann is a senior lecturer in the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. At UNSW, he previously served as a research fellow in civil and environmental engineering, as a lecturer in civil engineering, and as a lecturer in the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering. Dr. Kellermann describes himself as an engineer. I engineer things. As early as 4th grade, Dr. Kellermann knew he would be a mechanical engineer. A decade after receiving his PhD in computational mechanics, he shifted his focus towards teaching. UNSW has approximately 65,000 students. The university ranks among the largest in the world. That means Dr. Kellermann regularly manages classes of 500 or more students who all seek his attention in different ways. Dr. Kellermann wanted to move the students from 500 islands to a single team working together no matter where they are or their individual situations. So he put together a platform that combines just about every product Microsoft offers into a unique experience for learning, from a question bot that can answer students' queries and find and deliver relevant video clips from past lectures, to a Power BI dashboard that shows how students' exam answers compare to their peers and helps build personalized study packets for future tests based on their previous performance. Personally, I love Dr. Kellermann's enthusiasm for teaching, his concern for his students, and his willingness to use technology to improve course delivery and student engagement. Please welcome Dr. David Kellermann.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction, Kelly, and I'm really appreciative of Utah Valley University for connecting with me, because I have this sort of crazy idea, right, that higher education at this point needs to start collaborating with each other to collectively improve the educational experience, to work together on shared platforms that lift the entire sector together. And I'm really excited to get to talk with other universities and hopefully move forward in the future, partnering on our own software development and also working with industry and companies like Microsoft that build enterprise class software. And I say this because I think that in the year 2020, we're actually kind of being held captive by a lot of the educational technology software from that sector, because they want to keep our data to make money. They want to lock us into their environment, and we need to be on more open development platforms. Now, I've titled my talk today, Building Education 4.0, and there's a very specific reason for that. I don't know if many people are familiar with the term Education 4.0. It's kind of like the fourth industrial revolution, if you will, but it's the idea that there's a new paradigm in higher education that is enabled by a completely different tool set. So I'll start by talking about what Education 3.0 is. It was when the learning management systems appeared. All of a sudden, a student like myself, who 20 years ago, I went on campus and we were told to go to the copy room and get a photocopy of the notes. All of a sudden we had the internet and we were able to create a PDF of those notes and host them on an online site where all of the students in that class could log in and just magically get a digital copy of their notes instead of getting the paper version. And for the first time ever, students started having laptops on campus. No one had the internet yet, no one even had Wi-Fi, but we had a laptop and we could download a version of the notes, and it was amazing. Now, that was the beginning of Education 3.0. We were doing digital delivery of content, and we could start doing things like making a recording of the lecture that happened in the lecture theatre, so that if you missed it, you could catch up later by logging in and watching the recording. Now, today, at the end of 2020, we are at the sort of crumbling, rusting ends of Education 3.0, where we're still drawing out this learning management system paradigm of it being this kind of castle of content where we can get video recordings and PDFs and other material. What it doesn't do is anything modern, like simultaneous document editing, like a video call such as we are having right now, such as chat and mobile apps and cloud storage and cognitive services that can do natural language processing, bots, machine learning, artificial intelligence. There is a whole world of new technologies, none of which are built into the paradigm of the LMS. And as Kelly said, I saw all of these tools sitting there available at my university on Office 365 and Azure and Microsoft because we were using them as a modern enterprise. We weren't using them for our educational delivery. So I asked myself the question, can I build it all on a modern enterprise platform and leave behind the walled garden of the learning management system? Now, it is being recorded and I think it will be shared later. And the reason why I say that is because I've got a computer right here where I'm watching the chat. I've got a screen behind me where I'm presenting from. And some of you will maybe have noticed this nice setup I have. I can do really cool things like I can put the chat right here. So this chat is going to be part of today's recording. And the reason is that I don't want to have to read out the question. I want people who are watching the recording to be able to read the questions as they come in, and I will respond to them and it will give a better flow to the conversation. Now, this is what I do in my classes, and actually I invite my students to have a load of fun here, to post GIFs, to chat, to catch up with each other, in the same sense that you might sit down next to a friend in a lecture theatre and have a little conversation like, oh, how are you doing? Or do you understand why he did subscript X? And they actually self-resolve their questions and their problems here, and it brings a lot more community to these classes that we have. Another little thing is you'll notice a bit of university branding up in the top corner, but I'm actually doing this myself. So I'm live producing this, and I did that magically just then because I'm holding a production remote here in my left hand. So let's move on with things. And my talk today is really in two parts, which is pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. So essentially the first half of my talk, I'm going to go through quickly the first part, but it's everything that I'd done from around 2016 through to 2019. So about 4 years worth of development up until the point at which the pandemic hit. I had a whole lot of ideas of what I was going to work on. I was in a really good position for the pandemic, but I decided instead I was going to focus very specifically on things to do with online collaboration and connectivity. So that will be part 2 of my talk. Now, I'm from UNSW Sydney. We have about 65,000 students. If I'm not mistaken, UVU has got about a little over 40,000. So we're not hugely dissimilar in size. We're a little bit bigger at UNSW, and this is our beautiful campus. And I have not set foot on this campus since the 16th of March when I went home and Australia started going into COVID lockdown. Now, I am from the engineering faculty. Now, our engineering school has 17,000 students. That means just our engineering faculty is bigger than Stanford. I teach over 1,000 students at a time. Kelly introduced this. These are all of my actual students from the last semester of 2019. Of course, they're not all on campus at the moment. And at the top here, I've got my engineering mechanics class. That's my first year class of 500. And here I've got my solid mechanics class of 600 students. And they're all here. They're doing a test in these 2 photos. So you might be going, wow, that's crazy, right? I mean, teaching 1,000 students at once. There are probably some professors at UVU who might teach very, very big classes like first year economics who may be able to sympathize with this. But I don't shy away from it. I actively pursued having these giant classes. And there's two very big reasons for this. The first is that this is my team. And the more people who I have in my team, the more I can produce. If you're a manager of a business and you've got 1,000 people under your report structure, you have got a lot of capability and influence to get things done. And that's how I see my students, not as a burden, but an advantage. And I would choose a 1,000 student class over a 50 student elective any day, because I want that community. I want those people. I want that capability. The second reason is ROI, return on investment. When I've got 1,000 students, I can invest $10,000 on artificial intelligence, and at $10 a student, my ROI is very, very easily met. With very small classes, it's harder to do that. And I'm pushing new technologies and I'm bringing in budgets in order to do those. And once they get past the ROI and the proof of concept phase, we can then disseminate them across the entire campus, or in some cases, across the entire higher education sector. Now, okay, so, somebody just asked about a list of tech resources. That's something I'm happy to share with you. I'm actually here, I'm at home in my home lecture studio, and the entire setup that I have built here, there's a lot of hardware and software and studio lights, and I built this all myself in about a week. Now, this is what a learning management system looks like. We use Moodle. I just forgot whether you're using Blackboard or Moodle or Canvas. Actually, it's Canvas, isn't it? On the left here, I've got a Moodle page, and it's actually from one of my own courses from 2015. And there's a section that says lecture notes, and it's a big list of PDFs. And on the right here, this is from our lecture recording system or our lecture capture system. We use Echo. It's a different URL to Moodle. Maybe in the US you're using Panoptico or something. And this is a list of monolithic video recordings that were captured in the lecture theatre. It's very dull looking at these two things, but what you've got is a list of PDFs and a list of video recordings. Now you go into something like the pandemic, COVID-19, your students maybe are at home at their home state instead of on campus. Their courses rapidly pivoted online. The lecturer says, let's just use all of the lecture recordings from last year. Here are the PDFs, the exams in 6 weeks. And you're reading this PDF going, oh, I don't understand this. I'm going to Google it. There's a better document. And they're watching this video and they go, I don't understand it. And they watch a YouTube video. And then they start going, oh, hang on, I've got Wikipedia and YouTube, and both of those are free. What am I paying these tens of thousands of dollars of tuition for? There's better stuff on the web. And the point is that content today has become almost valueless. So let's think about this, right? Rewind to how I described the Education 3.0, the learning management system paradigm. Think about the experiences that students are having with this consumption content from a platform that was built around the basis of here is your consumption material, you may now access it. And you've got to ask yourself, do we invest in trying to modernize this? Do we bolt cloud storage? Do we bolt cognitive services? Do we bolt a modern forum? Do we bolt digital links, simultaneous document editing, bots, all of this around this crumbling, aging Education 3.0 learning management system? Think about that old building on campus, or do you just knock it down, bulldoze the whole thing and start from scratch? Well, that's what I did. In fact, I didn't use any of my university systems at all. This was a one-man skunkworks guerrilla project that I began with the help of a few key people in IT who were excited to do something really cool. And I started off with just one thing on my project to build a collaborative platform where 500 students work together as a team. And this year I had a goal in mind, which was not emergency teaching or to do the best I could. My goal was to make online better than on campus. So this is where I started. Student information system. We use some horrible thing built by Oracle. It's called PeopleSoft. It's terribly difficult to get any data out of. It does a dump of a CSV file of all of the student information at 2 in the morning, And then at 3 in the morning, another system picks it up and it synchronizes it to our learning management system. So with my IT team, we built a system using PowerShell that basically synchronizes all of this information to Office 365, and it creates a group. And the reason I did that, and this is before Teams existed, was because I was using digital ink and OneNote in my classes, and I thought instead of photocopying it, or instead of scanning it and turning it into a PDF, or instead of doing a screen print of my digital ink, of my handwritten work, I'm going to share the actual digital notebook itself. It's a collaborative document. And how do I create a group to share? All I need is an Office 365 group. I just type the name of my class and boom, that's it. It's shared with everyone. It even updates with changes of enrollment. So now 2017 came along and I'm already using OneNote and Office, and my students use Outlook to check their email because we use Outlook for our email server. All of our students are authenticated on Azure Active Directory. They're all part of this single group that's sharing a notebook. And Microsoft announced this thing called Teams. And I looked at it within a week of it coming out and I thought, this is so much better than the chat function on our learning management system. A web page, you've got to log in, navigate to your class, find the thread, check if somebody replied. Go in and look at the forums of your classes, and most of them will have maybe 50, 60 posts from the whole semester. One student asks a question, when is the assignment due? The lecturer or a TA replies, that's it, that's the thread. There's 40 or 50 of those, and it gives you a total amount of communication over the entire semester, maybe 100 posts, 50% of which are the teaching staff. So there are a lot of questions coming in, by the way, and what we might do, so there's a question, for example, how am I doing overlays of my live stream? I'm going to go through a lot of this throughout my presentation, and maybe Kelly and the team can keep an eye on particularly great questions for me to bring up at the end, because I think I'm going to answer a lot of these questions throughout the talk. Now, Teams came along and I thought, let's do it, right? I walked into my classroom one day and I said, hey, everybody, I'm going to shut down the Moodle forum. We're going to use this thing called Teams. Here's a link. I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, no one in the world knew what this was at the very beginning of 2017. And in fact, it turns out I was the first person in the world in higher education to start using Teams for higher education. And everyone started laughing and I was like, oh, what is it? And I look on the screen behind me because I'm sharing screen, and the students were already posting GIFs and pictures and things in Teams in less than 1 minute. So it took 1 minute for students to find the link, go to Teams, download the app to their phone, log in using their university credentials, find the class, find the forum, and start posting. 1 minute. So adoption is not difficult. Why? Because it's a modern app. Nobody teaches you. You don't have to do a course to learn how to use Instagram or TikTok. You just open them and you know how to use it. And Teams is the same thing. You open it and you know how to use it. And this is what modern software is. So straight away, students start posting photographs and screen grabs and code snippets. And we've got this flood of communication that's happening. In the first week of the class, there are hundreds of posts, more than I would have in an entire semester. And I thought, this is amazing. How cool is this? So I had to reorganize my course. As time went on, I wanted to pull more and more stuff out of the learning management system and put it into Teams instead. And one thing that I did is I started creating a channel for every single week of the semester. So this is week 9, and I rebuilt my curriculum and I perfectly aligned every one of my topics to fit into 1 week. And I did this for a very specific reason, which is to create an a priori data schema. That is a schema where all of the events that happen within a week can be matched up to a particular topic we're discussing. And I'll come back to this later, but it's to do with data and learning analytics. So I've got a channel week 9, rigid body, energy and momentum. I've got a tab here that says week 9 slides, and here are pinned the slides for week 9, rigid body, energy and momentum. Great. So students found this really easy to navigate. It was really easy to understand. Go into that channel because it's week 9 and there's everything you're looking for. Now Teams does a really cool thing, which is that when you create a new channel, it automatically creates a tab, and you can see notes here, which then automatically creates a section with the same name as the channel in the OneNote class notebook. And so while I'm lecturing, as I would be now, we've got a class and my students are asking questions and we're talking back and forth, and I'm doing the mathematical and the diagrammatic calculations in my engineering class. This is syncing to the cloud in real time, and here are my 500 students. Here the list goes down for a very long way, and it's syncing to their notebooks. Now, some students would be in a big lecture theatre, they're in the back row, they can't quite read what I'm doing on the big screen, and they've got their notebook in front of them and it's all syncing in real time. But today, with the completely online mode that we're doing during the pandemic, we have this as an incredible resource for students to be able to know that they own those notes, are co-creators and co-owners, and they spend their time during the classes talking with me and engaging rather than scurrying to copy things down. Now, this is a sort of nice memory of when I was on campus and I would, stand there and I would talk to all my students and say, hey, what do you all think? And they would call back to me. And I created a live stream system in 2017. We were using YouTube Live, and I have a camera man. It's actually 2 students we have who we would pay, $30 an hour. One would operate a camera and the second would have a live production rig. And here they're doing a side-by-side scene of what's on the screen and me, and they switch these different scenes. Then we'd go out live with it. Now, that was great, except it turns out that if a lecturer would say post a video because they're doing media studies, YouTube would detect the video, it would do a copyright takedown, and the whole of UNSW Live would get pulled down off YouTube, and it was a real mess. Now, later that year, Office 365 came out with a new integrated product called Stream, and we beta tested a very early version of the live stream product. And that's the basis of what we're using right now. It's now Teams Live Events. And I beta tested this instead for classes, and now we had it closed with access control within our enterprise with deep analytics and live transcripts. I invite anybody to wiggle your mouse over to the meeting control, hit ... turn on live captions, and you will see that Stream and Teams will do an incredible job of transcribing what I say in real time. So we have incredible accessibility features. We're on platform, we've got analytics, we've got content control, and we got it all for free as part of our Office Live subscription. And this was better. It's already better than our lecture capture system. Now, we did some cool things. I created a Power Automate script that automatically put every one of those class recordings into a lecture gallery. And that lecture gallery is pinned as a tab in the general channel of Teams. So I walk in, I give my lecture, I walk out, I've got my production team, and boom, a new video recording appears here. So I've now replicated our $2 million lecture capture system on my own with the help of a couple of our engineering learning developers for nothing. And it's better. So that's a really interesting paradigm in terms of where we are with EdTech. So really cool things you can see here, very esoteric live closed captions. Here I'm down in the bottom corner and we're doing the big screen share of the class notebook. We're doing modern things like, for example, everyone knows today about cloud collaboration, multiple document editing, storing your document in the cloud and working on it locally. Now, when I give my students an assignment now in Teams, I make a master document, a template in Word, I put it up on assignments, and it's in SharePoint. And every student starts their assignment, and it makes a duplicate copy of that assignment. And now what is happening is that they're working on it locally on their local copy of Word, but it's saving the changes word for word up to the SharePoint cloud that backends the actual Teams site. Now, not only is this a huge boon for problems like contract cheating, where we get this black box PDF, where did it come from? But we've also got the analytics to understand about the process that students went in doing their assignment. Did they write the whole thing last night? Did they do it progressively over the entire period? And this sort of information really helps us to understand the process rather than the product of what the students have done. So yeah, there's a question here, which is, if you're using Teams for LMS 4.0, how do you grade? Well, it turns out that this is Teams assignments and it has got a grading environment, and I'll give you a little sneak peek at that later, but it has rubric, it's got APIs for the rubric, it's got feedback tools, it's got everything. And even tools like Turnitin, which I don't use, but they're already integrated into Teams assignments, so we have no problem with this kind of thing. So what about our learning management system, right? You've got a whole bunch of legacy stuff, which is some really expensive learning activity that you developed on your LMS, and you can't just walk away from it overnight. Well, we actually now have Moodle running as an app inside of Teams. So it's authenticated using OIDC. It's pinned as a tab in Teams. You click it, you're already logged in, and you can actually pull out separate blocks or activities from within Moodle and turn them into standalone natively rendered activities within Teams. We can do even integrations with bots, integration with assignments and the gradebook, and actually take all of those legacy things that we have in the LMS, and we can put them inside Teams and wrap conversation and communication around them. And there are things like forms, where I can make quizzes incredibly quickly in Forms. They work great on mobile or PC, and I can deploy them as a quiz in Teams, and the marks will all go to the Teams gradebook. We also have some really cool software, like for example, MATLAB Online, one of my favorite pieces of software. It's got, we've got a campus license for that, and I can pin MATLAB Online as a tab in Teams. We're rendering this incredibly responsive piece of software. It's running in the servers. Students from anywhere, even an iPad, can open this up. They can use this highly powerful computational software, but we've got communication wrapped around it because they're learning. They might open up the docked chat and say, hey, I'm really struggling. Can someone help me with this? They're sharing their screen, they're chatting about it, and they're learning as they're doing. Now, one thing that educators are really familiar with in learning management systems is the home page of your course. You lay all of the material out. Here are the, click here to get to the lecture slides. This is what we're doing this week, and so on. And actually, we've got a fantastic parallel, which is SharePoint pages. Now, everyone who's running a team class should be making SharePoint pages. They're so simple. You go to the SharePoint side of the team. That SharePoint side is the back end of the team. It already has all of the authentication and the content access restriction, and you can build these beautiful SharePoint pages. Now, I know, because I've spent years building Moodle pages, it is easier to build these SharePoint pages than it is to build pages on your learning management system. And what's really incredible about it is because SharePoint is hosting the actual versions of it. When I put a video in here, that video is going to play right there because it's on SharePoint. When I put a document down here, like a PDF or a PowerPoint or a Word document, it's the actual document right there rendering. And if I'm reading it and I realize I made a typo, I just open it and I change it. I don't have to change it and then re-upload and reduplicate the version of it that's on the learning management system. It's the actual version that is hosted and rendering there on that page. Very advanced. Now, there are cool things like Power Platform, for example, part of the Office suite where we can make apps that have the same access control and access to the cloud of data relevant to that course. And I had this idea about when a TA is there next to a student, they're looking at their work and they're giving them a mark for it. What if instead of them writing it on paper, then putting it in a spreadsheet, then emailing it to the head TA, then them combining all of the data, then doing a VLOOKUP and putting it into the master spreadsheet? What if they just tapped a button and it went straight to the single source of truth, Azure SQL in the cloud? One click, done. Perfect data flow. That allows us to do really cool things like live analytics. But it also allows us to do the opposite, which is pull down from the cloud, so that the moment a TA is sitting in front of a student with their smartphone, they're next to Raymond, and they see here that Raymond has got 3 oranges for the past week of his homework, which means it was late or it was incomplete. And the TA goes, hey, I've just noticed you seem to be struggling a bit with the course. Is there anything that we can do to help out? So that data has allowed our TA to reach out to the student and do something really humanistic because they're powered with more information. They've got a better understanding of that student. Now, I keep talking about information and data, and one of the great things about universities is that we have a very good mandate for the use of student data when it is specifically for the purposes of improving educational delivery. Now, that's part of what a student agrees when they do a degree, which is that we're allowed to use their information to improve educational delivery. We can't give the data to Google and let them sell them ads for a new calculator or something like that. But what we can do is we can use all of that information to help improve the student's learning experience. Now, what I've got here is an incredible data app. This is called Class Insights, and it's part of Teams and it's free. One-click deployment, and all of a sudden you have got the telemetry of all of your students and how they're engaging in the platform. And what is really astounding is not just how cool this tool is, and I work with this team really closely on developing this product, but remember those 100 or so posts I told you about? Well, I'm teaching a class right now with 300 students. Now, it's not 500 because we have a lot of international students that haven't been able to make it to Australia. But for that class of 300, I'm 8 weeks into semester and I have 14,000 posts, replies and reactions. 14,000 up from about 140. So we're talking 100x increase in digital engagement. That is a mind-boggling number, that by improving the platform, we've got 100 times the student engagement. So here's a thing, you might be going, whoa, did you just say 14,000? Are you telling me that you got 14,000 student questions coming in? How on earth do you deal with that? And it's a great question. Well, I built a bot. My bot is called Question. And the reason it's called Question is that when my students post, they say, I have a question, or I'm stuck on question 3.1, or question, does anybody know? And what they do now is they tag at question, okay? At Q, and then autofill, they just hit spacebar. So it's easier to tag question than it is to type the word question. This is a lower than zero entry point. It's easier to tag the bot than to not tag the bot. And when they do this, what the bot does is it does something really simple. It looks up which tutorial section the student's in, and then it looks up who the tutors are responsible for that particular student. And then what it does is it tags them and the tutors get a push notification, or the teaching assistants, if you will. And this helps grab their attention. So the teaching assistant might be, you know, standing at the bus stop and their phone pings and they go, oh yeah, this is an easy question, and they tap out the response. And then the student gets a response minutes later, not days later, minutes later, they're still holding their pen on the problem and boom, their phone goes off. How amazing is that? And this is treated like a service ticket. So that student's question is a task that has to be done. And we will not miss a single question because we actually have a list of every single unanswered question. And how do you close that service ticket? Well, the person who answers it or the student marks it as being the answer. Now the ticket is closed. So the bot has got question and answer pairs. They're paired together, but they're also filtered within a particular channel that's about a topic. So I've got a question and I've got an answer, and I know that that question answer pair is about energy methods. So we have this extraordinary data resource, and what that actually means is that I'm able to take all of this information and I'm able to return value to the students by curating this kind of Q&A. Now, of course, all of this works beautifully on mobile, but one thing that you can see is that the bot automatically creates a tab of all of the unanswered and the answered questions to do with the particular topic, filtering out all of the other chit chat that might happen. So what do we do with all of this information? Well, actually, throughout one semester, the first semester I deployed the bot, I ended up with 1,000 question and answer pairs. You're looking at all of the question and answer pairs. Every one of these is a little question and answer pair here behind me. And so what I did is I fed all of that into Q&A Maker, which is an Azure Cognitive Service, and I used it to train the bot's own artificial intelligence. So the bot is now the collective question and answers of 500 students for 10 weeks, 10,000 posts of information held within the single AI. No effort to deploy because it self-trains. And when a second question, a student asks a question similar to a previous one, the bot takes their question, it uses natural language processing to look up against its database. And then if it finds a really good match, you can see that we've got a confidence score here. It will reply instantly to the student and say, I think the answer to your question might be here. And it does that before it tags the TAs. And then when the student goes, yeah, that's great, that's really helpful, it jumps them back to the thread that might have been 7 weeks ago, right up the list, where the other students were talking about the same thing. Now, the new student then might type an answer and go, this was really helpful, but what about the situation where the force is reversed? The original people discussing it get a push notification saying someone replied to your thread, and now the new student has been engaged in a micro-learning community. They've been connected with like-minded individuals. And we're using artificial intelligence and bots not to replace humans, but to connect them together. Now, sometimes students might do a post. I actually have these workbooks. I've got one right here. I print these out, and during the pandemic, I post these all over the world, and the students do their work here. That's equity, by the way. I don't assume my students even have a printer. And when they're working on their engineering problem, which involves ink and handwriting, maths and paper, they often take a photo and they say, oh, I'm stuck on this problem. Well, how do you take that and make a knowledge base out of I'm stuck on this, can you help? There's no information. So I put these QR codes here on every single part of the learning material. So you can see there's a QR code. It gets captured in the student's photograph, and then the bot is able to use a vision service to read the QR code and match the response against the particular question that the student was asking. And it can also go, oh, I see you're working on question 4.1, and it can pull up a better native version of the image in the picture that's really clear and crisp from its own Azure Blob storage in the cloud. Now, we can do really cool stuff, like, for example, remember those stream lecture recordings where we have all of the transcripts that have been generated automatically by machine learning? They're pinned to every minute or second. I can actually take the bot and I can search against the transcript of the lecture for that week. And if a student says something like, does anyone know what Newton's second law is? And it turns out that I spoke about Newton's second law in the week 2 lecture that student missed, the bot can say, I think your answer to your question might be here in the lecture. And it can drop in a deep linked video preview to exactly 56 minutes and 13 seconds into that lecture. The student hits play and there's me going, so Newton's second law, you know, in the class that we did, and their question's been answered. So we've unearthed a resource through something that's more powerful than search. It's unearthed a resource that the student didn't even know existed and wasn't even searching for. They were just having a conversation between people. And the bot chimed in and said, hey, I think I can help you here. And if the bot can't help, it just keeps quiet and it stays out of the way. So this is ambient AI. Okay, so 10,000 student posts goes from being a burden into being an asset. The more students I have, the better the knowledge base is to help those students study. How cool is that? By the way, that's called QuestionBot. I spent about $250,000 of it. It's open source on GitHub. You can go to GitHub now and you can get it all for free and you can contribute to that project. It's built on Teams bot framework. Now, remember that live lecture I told you about? There's this thing here and it's actually it's called a universal tensile testing machine, and your engineering department will have one of them, or your material sciences department. And what it does is it basically breaks stuff and it works out the curvature of the elasticity of the material. We actually have that piece of equipment. It's there in our laboratory. It's very expensive. It's very dangerous. It has incredibly high hydraulic pressures. And we can't get 500 students into this room. We're only allowed to have 10 people at a time, and they have to do an OH&S induction. How can I make this more available to the students? Well, what if I point an augmented reality camera at the rig, and I don't just have a video of it, but I have a full three-dimensional map of the rig in real time live. Now at this point, I can have a second camera and I can point it at the lecture theatre, and I can come up with a real 3D map of the lecture theatre, where the floor is, where I am, where the wall is. And during, you're watching the live stream of a lecture here. So, you know, just for a moment, you imagine that you're doing this. We're solving the problem together with Digital Ink. We've predicted it's going to break at 4.2 millimeters of deflection. Let's jump over to the lab. And there is the rig sitting on the floor. Now, it's not actually there. We've placed it there in augmented reality in real time. And I can walk around it. We can do that experiment and see what happens. We took the lab and we put it in the teaching space using augmented reality. So we do all of this and we've got this incredible amount of data. And what do we do with that? Well, one thing is we can use dashboard systems like Power BI. And for our 65,000 students, they can view these for free on our A5 license. We're not paying Power BI license. The product's just sitting there. It's just that no one uses it. So we create these Power BI dashboards, and now the student can contextualize all of their data. And it works on mobile. But what's even cooler is, what if I take all of that data, and remember I told you about those that data schema where every single week is a channel and every channel is a topic and every topic has got learning material and telemetry around it. But actually, I then have an exam, which is 10 questions for 10 weeks, for 10 topics, for 10 channels. And I see every single one of these as being a data silo. So I get a key value pair against, did you post in the week 1 chat? Did you watch the week 1 video? Did you click the week 1 PDF? Did you do the week 1 quiz? Did you, and so on and so on. And I can train all of these against how you do in the question 1 of the final exam. But I don't train one student, I feed all 500,000 data points into Azure Machine Learning in the cloud. And it finds all of these very incredible correlations between student behavior and understanding. And this model, I can lift all of the coefficients, the weighting coefficients of the ML model, and I apply them to the next year's cohort when they've finished the 10 weeks, but before they've done the exam. And that ML model is now with exquisite prediction, allowing me to predict what every single student is going to get for every individual exam question 2 weeks before the exam. Now, I make a database of ability or competency classified problem sets for every one of the 10 topics, and I feed it into a .NET algorithm, and we generate a personalized study pack for every single one of my students. That's 5,000 predictions being used to make 500 tailored study packs. Now, batch upload it with individual access rights, pin it as a SharePoint tab in Teams, 1 click, hello, your name, here is your personalized study pack, the best possible way you can spend the next few days studying for your exam. That's harder working students that learn more and do better. We're not spoon feeding them, we're giving them the material they need so that they can do the work to learn and do the best they can. And boom, there it is, your name on the front. Now this is a truly tailored learning experience, and it's completely scalable because of the way I've designed the architecture, and that's the engineer in me coming out. So everything I do now is live, creative, and collaborative, no more consumption. Now I don't have a lot of time left, and so what I want to do is I want to jump in really quickly to part 2. Now I will just say that I climbed from 75% course satisfaction to 99% over these 4 years. I asked my students if they felt part of the learning community. 100.0 of them said yes. And 2019 finished and I felt good, and then along came COVID-19. And in fact, in 1 month, education and work completely changed forever. Now, I had a bit of a head start here. Pretty good cloud platform, looking kind of nice. But there are still 5 things that I relied on this place for. The physical campus, the assumption that all of my students were here in person and that I had facilities. Now I've got students all over the world. I've got students in the US, Spain, China, Thailand, the UK, and all around Australia where our states are individually locked down and you can't cross borders. These are the 5 things: lecture theatres, tutorials, laboratories, study days, which were social gatherings to prepare for an exam, and those big exam halls where we had people walking around invigilating exams. So I'm going to ask you now to join me for a lecture in the mechanics of solids. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in the waiting lobby of my class, and this is an actual photo of the outside of that lecture theatre that you saw pictures of earlier in my presentation. And I'm going to say, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Eng 1300. Really excited to have you all here. How are you all doing? And I get a big flood here of chat. And of course, my students can just unmute and they can say, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. But my students prefer chat. They prefer it at 100-to-1 ratio. Now, in a class where I used to get maybe 10 students would put up their hand, I'm now getting 200 to 300 chat comments for every single class that we have. And I watch these here on my screen and I can see, wow, love the customization to improve learning. I'm reading that right here. It's the latest post. And as I teach and as I work with the class, they're constantly talking to me and they're talking amongst themselves. And I say, okay, we're going to be working on symmetric bending, composite beams, deflection functions. We're going to calculate the max deflection. Let's have a look at beam deflection today. Famous beam or span that we have is the Harbour Bridge. It's got this classic catenary curve. We could use a 3D model of that, maybe a morph effect in PowerPoint, and we can classify this as a really simple engineering span. Now we've got a whole bunch of mathematical functions here that we need to use in order to calculate that loading. And in order to calculate the deflection, maybe we're doing some fine mathematics here like 2 pi x squared. Now at this point you're saying, well, hang on, everything you're doing on the board, I have to try and read the camera version of it. And actually, no, you don't, because I can just click a button casually in my left hand, which I did just then. Now you're seeing the lovely campus here at that particular moment. There are different views of the campus, but actually what I can do is I can share my screen directly to you. And so now as I'm writing here on the screen, you've got a crisp, direct shared version of that. Now we move along, let's do a worked example. I've got a hyperlink here and I'm just going to tap on that hyperlink, and what it does is it jumps me over to the OneNote class notebook. Now here it is, it's just opening up the updated version of it. If I tap over here on the left side of the screen, you're going to see there that there's a massive list of my 500 students there, which are co-authors and co-owners of this. And as I do this problem, I'm able to interact with this screen. I'm able to draw these diagrams in real time. And as I start to do this, maybe I'm going to do a picture of this deflection. You know, perhaps I'm going to start drawing one of these beams in real time. And one thing that you might notice is you're now looking at my back. And so I'm going to click another button and all of a sudden, hey, I'm right here. And so I'm looking at you and I'm looking at the questions and I'm solving this problem live. And one of the students says to me, hey, but where does the maximum deflection occur? And I go, oh, well, that's a really great question. It turns out that it doesn't happen right here where the load is being applied, but the maximum deflection on this beam actually occurs here where the gradient of the beam is 0. Now we can go ahead and we can then take a different track, and they say, well, how do you calculate that? And I go, well, it's where the slope is 0. So let's just do a derivative of that. We'll find out where the slope is 0, and it turns out that we predict it should be 8.82 meters. Now that's pretty cool, right? But I can actually mix digital and physical together and go, well, here's our beam, let's have a look. Here's the force being applied, just as you see on the screen. And look, you can actually see the maximum deflection is occurring about here, right where we predicted theoretically with our calculations. That's cool, right? But we've also got a laboratory. And in the lab, we have this real testing equipment. And what I did was I digitized the entire three-dimensional space, and I built an augmented reality environment using SharePoint spaces. No new software, it's already there. You have it right now on your Teams tenant and it costs nothing. And so what you can see is we can look around the three-dimensional space and you can see that that SharePoint document that was given in the lab is actually a document right here. And you can see right here that we've digitized the experimental rig and the students can actually, this has got accurate physics on it, and the students can actually zoom into this rig and they can take their readings of the experiment off the actual AR environment. So we now have this highly engaged digital lab where you actually have to be in the lab and you actually have to get your readings from it. You're not just watching a video recording of what's going on. And so we get to the end. Let's summarize the class, and next week we're going to do distortion energy. And I say, okay, thanks everyone for joining me. This has been really cool. I'm going to see you next Monday, but remember we've got a test this Friday. That's it, Dave, out. And I click another button and now we're at the exit of the lecture theatre. So I'm back here and let's go on and talk about tutorials. I want to be really mindful of time here. So I'll just say this is really simple. The tutorial room becomes a Teams meeting room. One of my tutors is online. They're answering the questions coming in on Teams. My other tutor is here in the physical space answering the questions that are in the class. The students can unmute on the call and it goes out in the TA system in the actual room and vice versa. And what's cool about this, especially during COVID, is that if we get a spike and they say don't go to campus, the students just move to online and there's no difficulty. It's a completely smooth transition. Laboratories, I already showed you my augmented reality lab. There's so much potential here. That was just a project I did on my own. Imagine if an entire institution invested in it. Study day, I used to get all of my students to come together. We'd order pizzas, get a coffee cut, we'd work together. I turned it into a channel in Teams where all of my 16 TAs were there answering questions all day. They would start ad hoc phone calls and video meetings, chat with the students, hit record, label it as how to solve, this type of problem. Incredible engagement throughout that day. But I also made a Flipgrid channel, which are these mini videos. And remember all of those problems that I gave the students in their personalized study pack that they just got? Well, they don't have solutions. And I gave them a bonus mark for making a video solution of one of those problems and posting it to Flipgrid. Now, in one day, students made and viewed the videos 1,300 times in that class. And they said, this was awesome. They're learning from their peers. They're getting to share their own knowledge. Final exams come. Now, we're used to this, the lecture hall. Someone walks around, checks for people, looking around, looking at smartwatches. What do? How do we move that online? E-proctoring, let's point a webcam at them. What an awful experience for the students. Now, I had already built a system where my exams had QR codes. We ran them through a scanner. We digitized them. We marked them in Teams assignments as PDF scans. And I rebuilt this and I reimagined it as a forms quiz. And I'll just share a better version of it. So I've got a forms web part. I've got 10 of them, or 9 of them in this case, embedded in a SharePoint page with hyperlinks that jump you to each of them, a timer that counts down on a SharePoint page that's embedded as a tab inside Teams with chat docked to the side. And I did something really crazy, which is I said, this is an open chat collaborative exam. Share your answers. Share anything at all that you want here. You are engineers, you put your name to your final answer, and I want you to work collaboratively on this exam. What a crazy polar opposite approach. Well, it turns out that the students love this idea of being trusted and treated as professionals and being respected. They rose to the challenge and their behavior was just incredible. Now, I posted these booklets out all over the world, and what they do is they answer in the sheets and then they use Office Lens to take a photo, make a PDF, and submit it to Teams assignments. And here is, just for someone who was asking before, this is how we mark. You've got all of the different parts here, you've got feedback, marks, and we've also got a rubric that we're able to bring up. And that rubric is a drawing of a diagram they're about to draw. And that diagram can be fed into Azure Machine Learning And we've got a hand-drawn diagram, and Azure Feature Extraction has pulled out the different parts of the components, and it said it believes that this is correct. I've trained machine learning to mark exams that were done on a piece of paper by a student in their home. And if it's wrong, Azure Machine Learning can generate feedback. But AI is not marking, it's AI in the loop. It is using the Education API, and it's pre-selecting the rubric and pre-filling the feedback. And when the marker goes through, they're having a look at what the AI said, and it's speeding up their interactions. And the marker can then spend more time to add additional feedback. They can have things filtered out like blank pages. Blank page, AI says, I'm 100% sure it's a blank page, it's 0, you don't even need to see it. And now my marker can spend more time focusing on human review and less time doing monkey work. That's better for our students. And what about academic integrity? Well, here's the Gaussian distribution of the marks from 2019 in a proctored environment. And here's the Gaussian distribution from just a few weeks ago when I ran my open chat collaborative exam. No difference. So we've got an integrated system, lifelong learners. Now there's something else here. I'm not going to talk about it today. I'm just going to give you a preview. You can join something called Project Lagro. Microsoft on LinkedIn. They've got an economic graph of 750 million professionals in the world. And we can create our own academic graph of our own students' skill sets. And what I've been doing with Project Lagro is working to help students understand their skills gap during their university degree while it matters to help them be more successful professionals. Okay, so that's Lagro. So can we leave behind the learning management system? Well, you know, I told you about that 99%. For the first time ever during the pandemic, I got 100.0. I think I made my course better by being fully online. Not emergency teaching, not trying to survive. I made my course better than it ever was before. So that's my greatest asset, my students. And those students are the greatest asset. Every one student has got 500 other students that are generating material and helping them learn. We have to leverage that in our environment. And AI is not there to replace humans. It's designed to do something incredibly humanistic and help us to reach out to those individuals and to connect those individuals. So knock down the building, start from scratch. Let's build something new on a modern platform with modern tools. We can build Education 4.0. Now, everything I've shown you today is just what I've done, just me, not my university. This is my projects alone. And I think if we created a coalition of universities that started building on a next generation platform, imagine what we could do. We can also partner with Microsoft, who are incredibly excited about the capabilities and what we're able to do with their product stack. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm here to take any questions in the, we're pretty much at time, but I'll hang on the line as long as it takes.
Well, thanks, Dr. Kellermann. That was exceptional, as always. Listening to you always inspires me. Maybe just a couple questions that I've read on the chat as you've talked. One was, or at least multiple were, how would you envision this being used in classes that are less quantitative, you know, less math oriented, less engineering, so communications, writing, that kind of thing? Any thoughts?
So, well, there's two different types there. I mean, I actually think engineering is one of the hardest things to do online. And for me, turning my engineering class with digital ink, like mathematics and laboratories and all of this kind of hands-on stuff into an online environment was one of the most challenging things. If we look at something like social sciences or humanities, where it's more about writing and reading and essays, these are much easier environments to go online with. I actually think that engineering and science are the hardest things to do with it, and that those other classes are going to be much easier processes.
And what do you think first steps are? So, you know, we have a faculty, when you know, the first time you listen to your presentation, the thought crosses your mind as a faculty member, like, okay, there's a lot of technology there. I'm really intimidated. You know, where do I start? And I guess from an institution, where do you think we ought to start to help faculty who are less technology oriented gain the skills they need to do this? What skills do you think they should have?
Right. Well, so talking about skills, our faculty have spent a bunch of time to learn how to use the learning management system, and it's been really painful for them. And we also have got an entire network of people at the university who are helping support the creation and the deployment of that learning management system. They're creating the page, they're rolling over the last year's course, they're doing all of this support. Now, all of that, to me, is a huge skills and learning burden that is wasted. And the reason is that that same academic then looks over at their research group or at their professional learning community or the academic board they're on, and they open up Teams and Office and Outlook. So they're already learning to be modern digital collaborators in enterprise software, and we're having to teach them a second thing, which is the learning management system. Now, if we teach them just the one thing, they're good at research, they're good at their enterprise collaboration, and they're good at their teaching one platform doing all three things. And the same goes for our students. We're teaching our students how to use Canvas or Moodle, and it's completely redundant the day they throw their flat cap in the air and go to industry. If we teach them how to use Teams and be professional collaborators, they graduate, they go to the workplace, and they go, I already know how to do all this. And we're already having that feedback from our students, going and doing internships and coming back and going, the company I worked at was using Teams and I already felt like a total pro on it, and I was even teaching them stuff they didn't know. Now, all of the really high-tech stuff I'm doing, I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I specialize in systems. And everything I've designed has been built to be scalable and deployable automatically, which means all of those AI, ML, data schema, bots, everything can be click button deployed automatically for an academic if they're architected in the correct way.
Well, thank you. Well, we're out of time, but did you see any single question that went by on the chat that you might be persuaded to answer?
Well, I'm excited that there were an incredible number of questions, and so in fact I would spend more than an hour just answering all of these questions. What I'm going to do is, when we end this call, I'm just going to jump here if this stays open, and I'll try and type out as many replies as I can. But I will also invite everybody that you can connect with me directly. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm D. Kellermann, and just ask me a question there. You can follow me on Dr. Kellermann on Twitter, and we can have a chat. And you can email me directly on d.kellermann with 2 N's at unsw.edu.au. And I'm happy to take any of those questions offline and go and connect directly with everybody.
Excellent. Well, very, very, very thankful for your time today, for your efforts to make connections with us. We've really appreciated the interaction thus far and look to much more. So I will have to thank you for all of us, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining this session. I really appreciate it.